Welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where we discuss amazing books written by talented authors. For Book Lovers Only Live Radio is a proud member of the Village Connector Media Network. If you love books, we have a home for you. Now time for your host and chief book lover, Rob Brown.
Hello, book fans, and welcome to For Book Lovers Only Live Radio, where if you love books, we have a home for you. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover. So excited today about our guest, international mindset coach, Dr. Jen Faber. She is supremely talented with a new book that we'll be discussing today with her. Trust me when I tell you, you are in for a real treat. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to formally welcome all of our listeners and our viewers. If you are tuning in for the first time, I'd like to cordially extend a warm invitation to you to join our Book Lovers Club. It's absolutely free. We keep our club members posted about new authors and new books coming out, book fairs in your area. We'll be offering special book buying deals and opportunities not available to the general public. And we'll also be having free contest giveaways as well. Coffee mugs, tote bags, baseball caps, pens. You have every reason to join. And we love welcoming new people into our Book Lovers Club family. And you can join in one of two ways. You can either go to www.forbookloversonly.com. That's www.forbookloversonly.com and enter your name, your email address, click here to join, and then you're automatically a member. Or you can text the word book to 301-321-8887. Then you'll receive a message on your phone with a link. Click on the link. Then fill in the form and then click sign me up and you're automatically a member. We are so excited to welcome you to the club that we'll even give you a free gift just for joining. So make sure you join us today. Now, our guest for today, once again, super excited, is Dr. Jen Faber. She's a lifestyle entrepreneur and coach who empowers people to break away from burnout in life to live the life of their dreams. She started her career as a chiropractor and built a thriving six-figure house call practice, then transitioned to coaching over 5,000 health and wellness professionals out of practice burnout. Now, realizing that something in her own life was missing, Dr. Jen sold her practice and everything she owned to live out of a suitcase and rediscover her purpose. After pivotal lessons in life, loss, and impermanence, she is expanding her mission by teaching unconventional ways to think, dream, and live by breaking past fear and doubt so people take advantage of the time right in front of them rather than put their lives on hold. Her new book, The 90-Day Life, How to Live More in 3 Months Than You Have in 3 Years, is about helping you stop putting your life on hold and start taking action right now. Dr. Jen, thank you so much for being on For Book Lovers Only Live Radio. We welcome you.
I'm doing amazing, Rob. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been following you for quite some time on social media, and I have just been very giddy about your book. I think it's going to be an amazing book. It's going to change a lot of lives. What inspired The 90-Day Life?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that let me break it down. One of the biggest statistics that I think is really shocking today is that 1 out of 2 people right now are burned out in their life and feeling unfulfilled in some way. It could be their work, relationships, their health, some facet of their life. And that's growing despite all the opportunities that we have in front of us. And for the first 30,000 foot view on me, I was a part of that growing statistic. I woke up at really 2 pivotal points in my life that I'll describe in brief, where I was feeling burned out and unsatisfied in my life, which the irony was things on the surface looked great. And the first pivotal point was when I was in the thick of having a thriving practice and I was really enjoying seeing my patients. It was something I had spent years building to get to the point that it was, and not just years of building the practice, but years of school dedicated to it. And yet I found myself wanting to make a bigger impact. I found myself being reached out by colleagues and peers who were feeling burned out in their way of practice and feeling burned out in taking care of their patients and just feeling at a loss, like I did when I first started my career and had my own decisions and transitions to build my own practice. Everything in my life is pretty unconventional. I like to break out of the box, and if I feel like I'm in a box, I like to break out of it. So when I realized I want to make a bigger impact, and the way to do that is going to be to help my peers and help people in my industry break it out from the burnout of the high volume and the stress of practice and teach them unconventional ways to build a practice like I did. So I sold my practice, stripped it all away, and let go of 7 years of work and effort. As much as I loved it and as much as I loved my patients, I was getting called to do something bigger. So not only that, I wasn't feeling very fulfilled living in Washington, D.C. It's a great city. I just didn't feel like I fit there. So I walked away from a city that I knew and a practice that I knew, moved down south to Miami. 2 years into that, and building my own online business now where I'm coaching and helping people in my industry and helping people overcome burnout in their own life and practice, I realized I didn't fit there either. I found myself continually on this string of instances in my life where it just didn't feel like things were quite right and quite lining up, even though I was making all these decisions to make changes in my life. So I realized, well, if I can't find a home, why don't I just sell everything I own and strip it all away again, like I did with my practice?
Wow.
So I decided to live out of a suitcase for literally the next 18 months. And I'm still partly nomadic. I have a home base now, but I still travel. Those 18 months, I would hop around from location to location, 100% living out of the possessions in my SUV, going from one place to the next. And it was liberating and it was amazing. And it had a lot of freedom. Yet that itch was still there. And I still felt like there was something missing in my life. Now, for people watching or listening to this, you might be thinking, what could possibly be missing, right? Here's this person who's creating this freedom in her life. She has more lifestyle freedom where I could travel and set my own time. And I had my own business that was starting to get momentum. But here's what I realized, Rob. I realized that despite all the changes I've been making, I realized that I was stuck in my own trap in my mind. I was stuck in a lot of fears in my mind, doubts in what I was capable of, inhibitions and insecurities that have been built over years of just my own doubt and own influences in my own life. So despite the freedom that I have in my lifestyle, I didn't feel free in my own mind. And I realized there was a version of me that knew I could do more, be greater, be more adventurous, take more action, stop trying to get it all right or get it all perfect, and stop putting things off, waiting for the right circumstances. So I had this question pop into my head, and I thought, what if I could actually try to do everything I've been putting on hold for the past several years and do it in 90 days? And it just popped into my head one day. And then all of these things started coming to me. I realized I had adventures I've been putting on hold. I wanted to hike more and travel more and summit mountains and do all these crazy outdoor things I was seeing my friends do. I wanted to make a bigger impact as an entrepreneur. I wanted to help more people outside of my industry. I wanted to get into the speaking circuit and write a book and just do more things that I've been so afraid of. I've been wanting to let go of bridges that I burned in my life and resentments that I learned. And I just realized I was piling up a lot of fear and regret. So that's what I did. And I realized, you know what? I'm just going to set up my own 90-day life challenge. And I'm going to see how healthy can I become? How successful can I become? Most importantly, though, how fulfilled can I be? And actually take action on all of these things I've been putting on hold because I was taking time for granted.
Wow, that takes a lot of courage. That takes a tremendous amount of courage. Now, why 90 days? Why not 60 days and why not 120 days? Why 90 days?
Sure. It's a good question. I'll be honest, it was somewhat arbitrary at first, but I say that on the surface because beneath that there was a deeper meaning. I've used 90-day increments in other facets in my life, setting business goals or financial goals or kind of living by like what's going on in this quarter of the year. And I've seen that used a lot in business applications. I was an entrepreneur several years in by the time I did this challenge. And so I was already accustomed to that time frame and was already accustomed to fast forwarding to day 90, what will I look like? What will my life look like? And then I can work backwards from day one, which is a lot of what I talk about in the third section of the book is how to really break that down and reverse engineer. How can we rebuild your life in that time frame? But interestingly enough, I realized it was also on a deeper level in that if you look at all the studies now on habits, there used to be this idea that to form a new habit, it takes around, I think, 21 or 22 days was the older research. The newer research shows that it actually takes around 66 days to form a new habit. And so I realized that I had to make it longer than 66 days because it was more than just one thing I wanted to change. But I also didn't want to make it too much longer and put it so far into the future that I could feel discouraged and that the gap was too big. And I think that's a reason why a lot of people struggle with goal setting, struggle with reaching their goals, struggle with New Year's resolutions because we create this gap of who we want to be and it's so far in the future. And I realized 90 days feels like the sweet spot. It feels like a sweet spot where I could do two things. One, take measurable action on what I want to do. But two, do it in a way where I could really break it down day by day, what am I doing? And use a framework that I was already familiar with, but put my own unique spin on it and use it where I could actually create multiple new habits over time.
Okay, so 90 days is ideal.
I think so. I think 90 days is enough to give people an opportunity to look into the future and map out and project what they really want to change. Really look at their life and ask themselves, what have I been saying no to in my own life? But not so far in the future that it can feel like they have to take these monstrous steps or make such transformational changes over such a long period. I think the longer we forecast out a vision, I think it can lead to a lot of overwhelm. And I think that's also why a lot of people are burned out, because we end up forecasting, waiting for such a time in the future. But 90 days is manageable. We can map down what's happening month by month and week by week and day by day. I personally believe that that is the sweet spot for really transforming your life. But I should also point out, it's not just about transforming your life in 90 days. A lot of what I talk about in this book is using the next 90 days of your life to actually create momentum for day 91 and day 92 and beyond. So I just think that's an important thing to distinguish as well. Making an initial transformation that'll also set you up for ongoing momentum as people move through their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
90 days absolutely sounds like the perfect time frame. Now, we love the book here. As we were reading it and going through it, in the book, you discuss owning your consequences. And you write, we are not going to go on a hunt to get it all right, but we are going to look at your life in a more systemized, structured, reflective way where you can accept your choices, acknowledge your emotions, and then move on and not waste another moment on them. So you can own the consequences of your choices now and chart a new path. Talk to us a little bit more about that. What do you mean by owning your consequences?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was actually a really vulnerable chapter for me to read and for me to share, or for me to write, excuse me, and for me to share, because I think for a lot of us, the choices that we make in our life naturally set us on a path. And I think we're taught that, we're taught to make all these fundamental choices earlier on in life. It could be, going to college and choosing a degree, or being in a relationship earlier on in life. We make these really pivotal milestone choices that can set set the stage for our life for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Now, a lot of those great milestones earlier in life can be a beautiful thing, so long as that you can wake up every day knowing that those choices are in alignment with the path that you're on now. And when it comes to owning the consequences of your choices, here's what I mean. With every choice that we make in our life, there can be a positive and a negative consequence to it. So in one of my own choices of deciding to become a doctor and dedicate a part of my professional life to building a wellness practice and being a chiropractor, I had to own the choice that by in doing so, I was committing to building a practice in a location, building a patient base and staying in one location for the next several years, and also commit that this was something I was going to stay in for some time. But I also had to own the consequences of the fact that if I wasn't feeling 100% satisfied with my work, despite how much I loved it, I had to own the consequence that that could also be a negative, that the choices that I loved from my past, I had to ask myself, how much is it worth for me to get attached to them and stay stuck or feel stuck now that at this stage in my life I was itching to do something more? So I think there's an opportunity for all of us to evaluate our choices and ask ourselves, what are the consequences of the choices, both positive and negative? And then we can really evaluate, does the positive outweigh the negative with where I am in my life right now? For me, it didn't. I wasn't happy in a location. That's why I sold my practice. And then I wasn't happy to where I moved to, so I sold my possessions. I'm not saying it was easy, but in the book, I really help you maneuver through that process of how to understand and map out your choices, how to understand the consequences of them, so that way you don't feel so afraid of change. And I think people can really see change as scary. I think we're taught that change is scary because, again, it means something's going to happen. And there are consequences to those changes too, which is important to own them, and why I address that in the book. We have to own the consequences of everything that we're doing in our lives. How does it impact us? How does it impact others and the people that we love? But most importantly, it's the most important that we are choosing to live on a path that really taps into who we are and what we want to do and how we want to spend our time. Because by doing so, we can actually live more into the life that we want, and everyone else wins as a result. So that's what I mean. And I also mean that with consequences, a lot of times it has a really negative term, right?
Right,
Like
it does.
people are like, oh, consequences feel like negative and scary. No, no, no. It's just a map. I just teach you how to map it out in a way where you don't get so emotionally attached or overwhelmed by it. What's positive? What's the negative? Let's weigh it out. If it's working for you, great. If it's not, let's make a change and get you to move past it.
And I think that's a phenomenal point, because I think a lot of times when people do stuff, they don't think about the consequences of what they're doing in many instances. I mean, you have to own your consequences. You have to know, like, look, if I go out on a 3 or 4 mile run, I'm getting in better cardiovascular health, or if I sit on the couch and eat donuts, I'm probably going to gain weight. I don't think people like think about the consequence. They just kind of like think in the moment. So I think that's a really profound part of the book.
Yeah, and if I could make just an added distinction on that too, I think a lot of times for the people that feel burned out in some facet in their life, and now that's 50% of people, you look at any study, right? I mean, 50% of people on the planet are burned out in some way, which is why I'm
Wow.
so passionate about the message in this book. I believe the reason why that's happening is that we're playing the victim to the lives that we've created. Or we look
Mm.
to things that have happened circumstantially to us, like a change in our life, a change in our health, losing a job. It can be easy to play victim because this happened to me, right? I can't do anything because this happened to me and it was out of my hands, and all that control's been taken away from me. I'm sensitive to that because we all have had things that have happened to us in our lives and we certainly didn't choose it. But what I like to point out is a distinction of, you can choose to play the victim in your life, but that will just lead to burnout, whether you created it or it happened to you. What I like to point out is helping you transition from playing the victim to what I like to think of as playing the architect. What
I
an
like that.
architect does beautifully is, what do? They create, they design, they build, they renovate, they tear it down, they build again, they redesign again. We have an opportunity to do that in every single moment of our lives, no matter whether something is happening to us or if it's something that we've created based on a choice from our past. So for your audience that's listening, I would think about that lens of, where do you feel like maybe you're playing the victim and feel like stuff is happening to you? What could that look like if you started to play the architect and realize, you know what, despite this, this is what I can do, and this is what I can change, and this is who I could be, despite whatever consequences or circumstances happen to me.
So dive into how the 90-day life challenge changed your life. Dive into that a little bit more.
Sure. It was a crazy ride because I will first say at the beginning, I mapped out all the things that I wanted to do. And I talk about that in the book. In a bucket list sort of way, how do you map out all the things that you really want to do? But it's not a bucket list in a sense. It's really about, what are those core things that really pull at your heart that you've just been saying no to for whatever reason, a fear, a doubt, or an excuse. And Rob, I looked at this artist sketch pad that was full of all of these markings of all the things that I wanted to do. There were 3 mountains I wanted to summit in the location I was living in. I wanted to apply to become a TED speaker. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to mend some broken bridges. I wanted to run a 5K and lose a bunch of weight. And I looked at that list and I thought, girl, you're crazy. You really want to step up to this? But here's what's funny. In the periods in my life where I've really, really thrived, and a lot of that was in my earlier years and academics and being a really high performer. I've always been a high performer. I really set myself up to be motivated to challenge myself and ask, can I really do this? And that turned into, what if I actually accomplished all these things? What if I actually did all of these things that I've been saying no to? So I plotted out what I was doing on a day by day basis and how do I get to these goals and how do I schedule out these goals and map them out? And look, I'm going to be honest. First, I'll tell you, I'll give it away. I accomplished all of it by day 90. But here's what's interesting about it. This is not about all of a sudden becoming this fearless person, right? Where, oh, I'm not going to feel afraid and I'm not going to doubt myself. I'm not going to feel insecure or question whether I can do this. Here's the funny thing. I woke up on day 90 being a healthier, leaner, more confident, more courageous, and a more fearless person. But the irony is that I used the fear to motivate me. I I was still, how do I say this? I realized that the only difference between who I was on day 90 and who I started as day one was a choice to act. And I think that's important to say because what I've learned since doing this 90-day life challenge there were so many things that I'd be scared to do because I'd be afraid of how someone would judge me or look at me or evaluate me and think maybe my idea is not good enough or worthy enough to share. Even things like this, like putting my book out into the world. Rob, it's terrifying. I mean,
I bet.
it's
I bet.
terrifying because when you want to create change in your life, you're also creating vulnerability. You're putting yourself out there. But it's also giving yourself the opportunity to step into a greater version of yourself that you've been wanting to be for some time. So here's what's fascinating about this for me. I'm still the Jen who has her fears. I'm still the Jen that sometimes doubts herself and questions herself. But the difference now in doing that 90-day life challenge is that I now understand how to maneuver through the fear. I now understand where doubts come from. I now understand how to get past inhibitions faster, and now I act. I'll pick up a phone call. I'll take an action. I'll get on the trailhead. I'll go to the gym. So I find myself now taking so much more purposeful action in my life and also making sure I'm just not wasting my time with nonsense head trash or distractions that are really just going to be a waste in the end. So I think it's important to share that we carry fear with us, but I've learned that we can use it as a motivating force to act and to change and to actually use to become someone who really embraces the clock and embraces who you want to actually become.
So basically, fear into fuel.
Yes, exactly.
Change
That's
fear
exactly
into
it.
fuel.
And how to actually channel that. And I talk about that a lot in the book as well, to actually not fear the fear. Because if you realize what's underneath that mask of fear, you actually realize all of these great ideas that you have or goals that you want to have or things that you want to do or experience that the fear has just been masking. And once you can peel that away and look at it as a place of fuel, all of a sudden things just start to well up from the surface and you're like, oh my gosh, I've been stuffing that in the back burner of my brain for years, and all this stuff starts to come out. And it's a really liberating experience to be able to go through that transformation in a 90-day period and then stepping up and realize on day 91, I'm going to keep carrying this torch and I can keep creating this type of momentum as I move forward.
I love the chapter in the book about the art of getting selfish. And I thought that was one of the chapters that really like grabbed me. I'm like, whoa, like getting selfish. And in that chapter, yeah, it's just like, whoa, in that chapter, you write, getting selfish in a good way is about creating self-love again. To start to listen to what your mind, heart, and being have been trying to tell you about what they need for a long time, and to not let that part of you go quiet. This is about putting yourself first again, or maybe doing it for the first time in your life. That statement just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think this is probably one of the most important chapters in the book. The book is phenomenal, but this chapter really grabbed me. How does a person get selfish in a good way?
Yeah. So first, let's break down the negative connotation with selfish, right? Just like how consequences can be seen as negative. A lot of what I like to do in the book is kind of buck the status quo of how people define things that can actually be barriers, like consequences, like being selfish, right? None of us want to be that egocentric, it's all about me, I don't care about anyone else kind of selfish.
Right.
It's right. It's completely flipping the switch. And I think what's happening to a lot of people today is that two things are happening. One is that we have access to more things, more apps, more devices, more things to help us be, more productive and more successful, right? But the challenge is that we're also being more obligated by more tasks, to-dos, emails, posts, catch-ups, deadlines, responsibilities, things to take care of, people to take care of. Now that's all real, right? So I'm not going to say, oh, you're just going to ignore all of that stuff. No, it's not about that at all. But it's actually about, are you tending to what you actually need along the way? Are you taking time every day to spend time on something that just gives you 100% unadulterated joy? Are you creating a time and space to just be quiet and give yourself time to be and focus on doing something that you love? Thinking of yourself in a positive way, focusing on a hobby that maybe you haven't created the time to do. And I know a lot of people out there listening might be like, but you don't understand. I've got so many things I have to do. I have so many commitments and so many tasks and responsibilities. And believe me, I hear you. I was completely there. The reason why I'm so passionate about teaching people how to get selfish in a good way, by actually focusing on what's going to, nourish their soul, right? Like what's going to nourish them to be like, this is something I can do that just makes me happy. It's just for me and it's just my time. Is that what I learned in my own experiences is that I was so focused on work, and I think in a good way, I've always loved the work I've done. But I was getting so focused on all the things that I have to do. And it just felt like all the stuff outside of me that I just had to get done. And I was just in this hamster wheel of stuff I had to get done. And I started to resent the things I used to enjoy. I started to feel less satisfied by the things I would typically be happy doing on a day by day basis. It could be something as simple as responding to an email from someone who had a question to learn from me, to a patient who wanted to schedule. I found myself actually resenting things I used to enjoy. And that was a scary feeling at that stage of my life, because I had to ask myself, why was that happening? And I think burnout can be masked in resentment. It can be masked in fatigue. It can be masked in overwhelm. And I think that's happening because we're focusing so much on everything that we have to do without nurturing ourselves along the way. And you can actually do both. Even if you were to take 5 minutes a day and focus on a simple daily practice, or listening to a favorite song, or reading a favorite book of yours, and just taking that time for you, ironically, what we'll actually realize and what you'll discover, like I did, you'll actually be able to give more back. And I was afraid of that. I thought, if I'm going to put myself first, I don't want to neglect the people that I care about, the things I care about, and the work I care about. What I actually realized is that by taking more steps on my own 90-day life challenge to be active, to eat food that nourished me, to plan excursions and adventures that I knew would make me happy without looking at a device and checking for my email to see if I had to do something.
Right.
I realized that I could come back to my work, to the people I love, to the causes I cared about, to my friends and family, and they got a better version of me that was happier and excited to be with them and more present with them, because I had taken that time to honor myself. So that's what I mean about really bucking what selfish means and looking at it as an act of self-love. And to further, for those people who are like, oh, yeah, I'm so used to taking care of other people or not thinking about myself, know that by doing so and making time for yourself, everyone's going to benefit. Everyone's going to win, because they're going to get a happier version of you. So it's a win for everyone across the board. That's what being selfish in a good way and practicing self-love can really do for you, and also an awesome domino effect.
And what's the number one thing that drives you to inspire others?
I would say it comes down to impermanence. I think if I had to choose a word or a theme, it's impermanence. Nothing in our life is permanent, right? And someday our lives are going to end. People come and go, opportunities come and go, money will come and go, and time will come and go. And when I was really 100% nomadic in those 18 months of my life, what was fascinating is that if I was only at a location for 4 weeks or 6 weeks at a time, I had to be really mindful of how I spent my time, because I could wake up in 4 weeks feeling that time just gone. And I didn't do the things I wanted to do. I didn't go to the places I wanted to go to, or experience the things I wanted to experience. And I got to experience all these mini chapters of my life where I was actually creating impermanence. I was actually creating loss intentionally. I was actually creating that the door was going to close, and at some point I would have to move on. And along the whole way, I also experienced actual loss through grief. We lost a close family friend. I lost my father. So I experienced loss when it just comes at you and hits you in the face, and you certainly don't plan it or want it. I think impermanence is such an important driving force for all of us, because a lot of times we put things off into the future because we think, I'll get to that later. I've got time. I'm going to put it off. I'm too young for that. I'm too old for that. I don't have enough time for that. And we put it off, and we take time for granted. And we don't appreciate the clock until all of a sudden it just stares us in the face and says, now you don't have this anymore. Or now you're faced with this diagnosis. Or now you have this scary news. And all of a sudden we give anything to rewind it. And anything like that could happen. It could happen now. It could happen tomorrow, and we don't know. So I'm so passionate about teaching people how to live a life where they are choosing a life of impermanence, where they're actually choosing to create a sense of amazing urgency in their lives to start to live into what they want now, not fill it with distractions or things that don't serve them or people that don't elevate them. And if you can actually choose it, when something in life happens to you that you don't want, and it's going to change the course of your life, you'll already know that you've lived into who you've wanted to be. You can approach it from a very different lens of appreciation without looking at dealing with potential resentment or regrets later on. So that for me is my driving force. I think too many people take time for granted, which is why I'm on such a mission in this book, but also who I am as a coach and an author and a speaker and all these things to help teach people how can you actually use the clock as your best friend and not as something that you're scared of or take for granted. That's what impermanence really means, because it's going to allow you to be very present and actually be who you want to be and act with a different level of purpose and intention and just go out there and rock it. And you'll end up being a happier version of yourself purely by making that choice to live that way.
That is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. Now, there are a lot of people that are watching and listening to this broadcast that they want to change. They look at you and say, wow, she basically sold her practice and just decided to live the life that she wanted to live and make, her experiences richer. But, I can't do that. I don't have the courage to do that. What do you tell people who want to make a change, but they're just scared? They just have fear. What do you tell them?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I will say is to you, my friend, if that's you, I got you, buddy. I completely know what you're going through and I know what that fear feels like. It's interesting. When I decided to become nomadic and I started to meet people who would ask, where are you from? It's kind of a weird question, when you live out of a suitcase. And I finally just started to say, I'm from everywhere and I live everywhere. Mm-hmm. And people would say, you're so lucky. You're so lucky. I wish I could do that. And I just realized I'm actually not lucky. I just chose it through a lot of choices and a lot of decisions,
right,
and overcoming a lot of fear along the way. It didn't just happen. None of this just fell into my lap. It's not like I just wrote a book, right? Like it took a lot of decisions to get there. So here's the thing. Underneath every excuse and procrastination and doubt or a thought that tells us, nah, I'll wait, or no, you can't do this, or you're not going to be able to do this. I think the fear of failure is a common thread that can really tie all of us back.
It totally is.
No matter the goal,
totally
right?
Is, yeah.
It totally is, yeah. And so I think the first thing is to actually acknowledge what you're afraid of, because it's really easy for fear to get masked in routines, patterns of thinking, self-sabotage loops. And by the way, we'll break all that stuff down in section 2. I'm going to help you break down how to overcome these fears that have been holding you back and how to overcome the self-sabotage patterns and behaviors that hold you back, because it's really just all the mask. It's how fear shows up. And what's really interesting is that one of the exercises I think is the most powerful thing. My clients tell me this, people that reach out to me tell me this all the time, that I love to teach and share in the book, is let's look at what you're afraid of. Let's just look at it and play it out, right? What are you really afraid of? How are you afraid to fail, right? What are you afraid that's going to happen if you try to do this? If you really make an attempt to make this happen? Let's go down the rabbit hole and let's do 2 things. First, let's address that elephant in the room that you've been afraid to ask yourself. What if you fail? Let's just ask, because you're telling yourself or you're concerned it's going to happen anyways. Let's ask that question. Let's actually call the fear out and say, okay, buddy, let's step up to the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Play it out. And what is fascinating is that what I found in myself, what I found in the people that I coach and people that go through this journey are like, oh, okay, if I fail, well, I'm not just going to sit there and accept the failure. I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to change something. Like I'd have to figure it out. And it could be changing a job, starting a new business, starting a relationship, right? What if you fail? Give yourself the chance to tap into your own power and ask yourself, okay, what if? What's my game plan? What would I do? How would I break it down? How would I overcome that failure? That starts to take the power of the fear away a little bit. I also recognize the fact that it's still projecting that the failure could happen, which is why I like to do a second step that I think is really important. And I'll outline this a lot more in detail in the book. This will give you something to sink your teeth into. The second is, okay, because you're so afraid of doing this one thing or making this one change, let's look at your life in 5 years. Still living into this fear the same way that you are, with the same doubts, with the same action or lack of action, with the same things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, with the same way that fear is just holding you in. Let's look at that. Let's paint it out. What does your life look like? And that, Rob, terrifies people. It terrified me. It scared me because I realized I'm giving this fear so much power. I'm giving it so much power that a lot of times what people will realize is that they've been letting this fear control them already for a long time, days, weeks, months. And it's painful to recognize it at first, but what it actually is really liberating at the same time. Because what you'll realize is that you're actually going to fear not trying more than that fear of failure.
Right.
You don't even know if it's going to happen. So for your audience that's listening, and if they know that they want to make a change, and I could probably talk to every single person on the planet that is something they want to change or something they want to do that they've been putting on hold, and I would give yourself the opportunity to play out the fear. Ask yourself, what would I do worst case scenario? But then most importantly, ask yourself, what does your life look like down the road if you keep letting this fear take hold of you? And I will promise you, I can almost literally guarantee the fact that if you do that, you'll wake up and look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm not going to not try anymore. I'm not going to say no anymore. I'm just going to go for it because I don't want to keep living like this. And that is where, as we talked about earlier, as you beautifully said, it's turning the fear into fuel. It's turning the fear of failure and taking away its power and actually using the fear of not trying being the motivation that drives you to make that change.
And the interesting thing about like the fear of failure and failure, it's like if you do overcome that fear of failure and you move forward with an endeavor, you say, okay, I'm going to do this. And you move forward and you do fail. When you look at it, you're like, oh my goodness, I failed. And you look around like, wait a minute, the world is still here. People are still doing it wasn't that bad, you know?
Right, exactly. And I think what's important too is that I'm really mindful of the fact that one of the reasons why I wanted to bring a really different perspective on this book and helping people transform their lives is that I think there's this idea that we have to ignore the fear or overcome the fear or not let the fear be a part of our lives. And that's actually not what courage is. Courage is actually about seeing the fear and taking action anyway.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to give you a rose-colored glass and say, I'm going to make you not feel fear again. No, let's use it as a tool. Let's actually use it as our ally because instinctually as humans, we're wired to be afraid. Let's embrace it. Let's actually use it for a source of good and a source of change. And if anything, a source of a mindset that just makes you feel more empowered with your life, even if you weren't going to change anything. But more than likely what's going to happen is that by using this fear as a source of fuel, you'll realize what you can actually do in the smallest of changes. And you can wake up in 90 days being like, yeah, I did this. Step it up and I'm ready to do more. So that's what I think is really exciting. And it's an honor for me to share it from this different lens because I like to keep it very real and really transparent, but I also like to call out the realities of like, let's actually use these very things that have been holding you back and let's make them assets. Let's make it a part of your toolbox so we can actually leverage that for the very momentum you've been wanting to create for some time.
That's cutting edge thinking that's going to change a lot of lives. We are so excited about this book. I know a lot of people are listening and watching and they want your social media information. They want to follow you. I want to make sure that they get that. I know some people are watching, but some people are just listening. So they can find you on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If they do a simple search at Dr. Jen Faber, and that's Faber, they can do that. But specifically, if you're on Instagram at Dr. Jen Faber, Facebook.com/Dr. Jen Faber, and LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com/IN/Dr. Jen Faber. Dr. Jen, we're excited. I know you're excited. I think this book is going to change a lot of lives.
Thank you, Rob. It's been such an honor to be on and to share this with your viewers and with your audience. Thank you for the opportunity to share the message of the book and the transformation I've been on, because it is my hope that this will inspire others to create the same satisfaction in their life like it has for mine.
Absolutely. We're confident that it will. Thank you so much for being on, and definitely stay in touch. We want you to have be back on our show when you write your second book. Hint, hint.
Oh, I would love it. I actually have a second one in the plan, so I would be completely honored, Rob, and let's just plan on it. We'll make it a date, okay?
All right, sounds good. All right, take care, Dr. Jen.
You too, Rob. My pleasure. Thank you.
We want to thank Dr. Jen Faber. This book is definitely going to change lives. We are super excited about her book, The 90-Day Life. I thought that the things that she's sharing in this book, are just so pivotal in having people, redirect and, as she said, be an architect and redesign their lives. We're super excited. Be sure to purchase a copy of her book today, The 90-Day Life, How to Live More in 3 Months Than You Have in 3 Years. It's available for purchase at forbookloversonly.com. So pick up a copy of that today. And Also, we want to invite you to follow us on social media. We're at Facebook for Book Lovers Only, Twitter at FBL Only, and Instagram at For Book Lovers Only 15. We are out of time, but we want to thank you for stopping by. My name is Rob Brown, your internet radio host and chief book lover, and this is For Book Lovers Only Live Radio. Wherever you love books, we have a home for you. Take care. I'll see you next time.